as well as one of your instructors in the courses. And I want to welcome you specifically to my office hours today. This is your chance to ask just about any question as it pertains to food and cooking. And I'll do my best to respond to those. As we get started with today's discussion, I'd like to cover a couple of items. On the right-hand side of your page, in the upper corner, you'll see a dialog box where you can enter a question or even a comment if you'd like to participate in today's live event. And those will make their way to the queue of questions that you see on the right-hand side of your page, highlighted lightly in gray. And the second item I want to mention is, as you look at these specific questions that are already posted, you'll see a heart-shaped icon. Now, if you would like a particular question answered sooner than later, go ahead and click on that icon, and it'll push that question up in priority. And I'll answer it a little bit sooner than the others. Okay? And, without further ado, let me go ahead and start in on our event today. And what I'd like to do actually is to talk, first of all, about a topic that comes up every once in a while. It's a theme, in other words, that I recognize from students, and that is, generally, how to start out with a Rouxbe course, as well as how to continue with your learning, even beyond your Rouxbe course. Okay. And, for a lot of folks who perhaps did not grow up in the kitchen and are, jumping into the idea of cooking and learning to cook anew in their adulthood, it can be a little bit nervous, right, or anxiety producing for some people. And the message that I want to convey is, take it a day at a time, take it a meal at a time, take it one shopping trip to the grocery store at a time, or one food delivery to your home at a time. Don't worry about perfection. Right, first thing out of the gate. I think, one of the interesting sort of psychological challenges around cooking is that it is such a mundane activity, right? We do it every day. We do it multiple times a day. That in a way, we expect it to be easy, right? It's kind of like taking a shower. We do that most days, right? And it's not like that, as it turns out, right? There's a lot to learn, just in terms of information. There are a lot of skills to develop when it comes to food handling, much like acquiring the skill and knowledge of any other activity, such as playing the flute, or maybe learning judo, right? All those things take time, and certainly you wouldn't expect yourself to pick up a flute and learn to play it with any level of proficiency after a week or two, or gosh, maybe not even 90 days, although you would certainly see progress, right? So same thing in the kitchen. Give yourself some time. I'm going to give you lots of time, and I'm here to support you along with my colleagues. And, even beyond, right, your Rouxbe course experience, whether you're in a 90-day course, such as the Forks Over Knives Ultimate course, or one of our shorter or longer courses, okay? Cooking is a lifelong endeavor, and it certainly is for me. And, for my colleagues that are professional cooks and chefs, we recognize that there is no end to the possibility of learning information and acquiring new skills, or deepening the skills that we have in this beautiful world of food and cooking. And so I hope you approach this with the long-term vision, and think of this, in the context of the longue durée, and just enjoy it, right? Experience the joy of cooking. All right. So those are your words of motivation for the day. Now, let's take a look at the posted questions. All right. And the first one is from Virginia. What is your favorite recipe in Ayurvedic cooking? Which area of cooking do you see trending in the next few years? So a couple of interesting questions here. So let's take the first one regarding Ayurvedic cooking and my favorite recipe. So, let me explain to the audience Ayurvedic cooking. And how that fits into the context of the larger world of cooking, and how this particular question intersects with the topic of Ayurvedic cooking. All right. So, Ayurvedic. Let me come at it from a different angle. Cooking, really, practically any cooking can be Ayurvedic cooking, generally speaking. Okay. I think the important thing to keep an eye on, or at the forefront of our understanding, is that this idea of preparing food Ayurvedically for somebody, whether it's ourself or somebody else, must take into consideration the doshic profile, right, of the diner. And so if we have Vata, Pitta, and Kapha as the three primary doshas, or bio-psycho energies, right, that are sort of front and center and at the core of Ayurvedic theory, then we need to tailor that dish, that beverage, or that meal to best align or balance the primary doshas, or primary dosha that is in question, right? And often we're talking about a dosha that is likely to be out of balance, and we're trying to restore that to the natural state, right, of that particular diner. And so, with that sort of individualized approach in mind, any, in this case, recipe, any favorite recipe, can be served with that Ayurvedic approach. And Virginia, to more specifically answer your question, I don't have a single favorite Ayurvedic recipe per se. Every meal that I produce is produced with the Ayurvedic principles in mind, and I approach cooking through an Ayurvedic framework each day. In our home, we have 3 members in our immediate family, and each of us has a different dosha that is the primary dosha. Now, we'll serve the same meal, but you can then adjust it with cooling herbs or heating spices or something else that will then better tailor that dish or that meal for that particular consumer. Okay. And so, whatever I'm eating is my favorite Ayurvedic recipe of the day. All right. Now, your second question regarding what I see trending in the next few years. Well, let me pull out my crystal ball here, and actually, I don't know that I'm going to say anything new. There are a lot of prognosticators out there in the food world that will probably have a better finger on the pulse of what's going on. But certainly the idea of plant-based food and whole food cooking, the whole food diet, which has been around, as a trend, for a strong trend for a couple of years, I think that's here to stay. And so expect that to be presented in different ways in terms of marketing to the consumer, but always keep in mind the fundamentals that we teach, frankly, in our plant-based courses here at Rouxbe around the cooking methods and those supporting techniques that will allow you to approach whole food cooking in a way that makes best sense for you in your situation. Okay, whether it's a certain equipment that you have, access to certain ingredients in your locale, perhaps it's food prescriptions due to allergies or other reasons. All of those things, can be taken care of very easily or accommodated very easily within a whole food approach to cooking and eating. Okay, and so in other words, sift through all of the marketing hype that we might see and focus on the core, right, of developing your skills around whole food cooking and enjoyment. Okay. Another thing that's certainly here to stay is, I think, online education. And so cooking falls right within that discussion. And, our offerings here at Rouxbe are only expanding due to demand from all directions, whether it's the home cook or whether it's the business, right, the restaurant side of our business that we tap into. And, we are here to serve the world, as it turns out. And so those are a couple of things that I hope that you might enjoy moving forward into, at least the next couple of years. Okay, thank you. And looks like Patrick has listed a couple of talks on Ayurveda from our live event archives to address the first part of your question, Virginia. I hope you'll take a look at them. Thank you. Okay, next up from Randy, suggestions on how to set up my refrigerator and pantry. Specifically, what are they looking for in the pictures I send in as my first homework assignment? Types of containers expected or easy setup would be helpful too. Yes, so one of our first assignments in some of our courses is the kitchen reset assignment. And you're asked to put some thought, right, to the places and spaces in which you store your food items. And, even to put a little bit of effort in tidying up those spaces. And this is in an effort for you, the student, to prepare for the course, both mentally as well as physically, right? This is mise en place for the course. So it's not for us, okay? And I want to emphasize that. When you tidy up your refrigerator or your pantry, we just want to know what you've done. And, hopefully you've engaged at a level that is certainly meaningful to you, and we'll provide some feedback. This is a sort of an introductory assignment. It also, allows you to better understand the interface with Rouxbe as you're uploading images and uploading text that's part of your assignment. Okay, and so I'll give you a little bit of insight here. We grade pretty easy, okay, on this first assignment. So in terms of containers, think about what makes sense for you, whether it's budgetary considerations or space considerations or something else. But glass containers are popular, as well as plastic containers. Many students will use, a set of containers that have tight-fitting lids that will, hold items securely. I think those are a great idea. Certainly not a requirement, but in my experience, it makes my organization a little bit easier here at home. And let's see. Yeah, I think that touches the basics, right, of what it is that you're asking here. Okay. So again, just for your own sake, right, take some time to take a look at your fridge, your freezer, your pantry. Some of us have, many spaces where we keep food, upstairs and downstairs. And so just check out those places and see that they're easy to access, that you know what's there, that you're prepared to use those ingredients. In other words, they're not so outdated that you wouldn't want to use them, in which case you might discard them now. So it's just a way for you to make a fresh start. I hope that's helpful. Thank you. All right, next up from Christina. Ideas on how to turn my love for cooking and healthy eating into profit. Well, now, this is a common question, and it's also a very big question. And, I would say first, think about what your passions are, what your areas of interest are relative to food, cooking and health. Are you a people person? Do you like to talk? Are you good at marketing, therefore, and reaching out to people? Or do you prefer to be, in the shadows, so to speak, or in the back of the house, as we call it, doing the cooking? Think about what your strengths are, what your skill set is comprised of, and just what sort of foods, or whether they're meals or whether they're convenience food items, or maybe a beverage that you might be interested in marketing and creating, and then begin to test that on a small scale with family and friends. And then also, I'm a big fan of creating a business plan, and a place to start in that effort is to visit a website for the organization called SCORE, SCORE.org. And SCORE is made up of volunteers, folks that have lots of experience in many, many different fields of business, including food-related businesses. And they're there to guide you through this process of perhaps starting a business, and also helping you with a business plan. And what a business plan will do is sort of push you down a path to address a number of topics or answer a number of questions that will encourage you to think more deeply about this concept that you have, right? Whether it's the marketing piece, or the menu development piece, or the ingredient sourcing question, so that you are best prepared once the time comes for you to pull the trigger, so to speak, and start this project. All right. So give that a try. I hope this is helpful. Thank you. All right. Next question. In my chopping, some of my finer foods, such as thin carrots and green onions, have a curl to them. This makes it almost impossible for me to follow a straight cut along the length of the plant. Any suggestions on how to manage cutting these? Yes. So the curling food is, in my experience, a sign of freshness. And it is a challenge for all of us that are slicing carrots, especially very thinly. And so one thing to consider is, all right, if you need to have very consistent, very neat cuts, then try to, sort of stabilize that one piece of or edge of the product with multiple fingers before you come in for the cut. Okay, and if you've got just a little bit of fingernail, that sometimes will help get some grip again, on the edge of that piece of produce, the carrot in this case, allowing you to better stabilize it before you come in and make the slice with a knife. Now, I've also noticed that when a carrot is maybe not quite as fresh and plump, maybe it's been in the fridge for a few days and lost just a little bit of moisture, that tendency to curve is reduced, and it's a little bit easier to make those knife cuts. Okay, just a little, I don't want to call it a chef's tip, but just a little insider tip. Okay, and then, in terms of green onions, if you're cutting them along the length of the green onion, then the fibers have a tendency to curve, we take advantage of that sometimes when we make garnishes, and we'll even make some long cuts, either slightly on a bias but otherwise just generally along the length of the green onion, and then place those into a bowl of ice water, and then to make them curve even more, and then we can garnish the top of a salad or a plate of fried rice or something else before service. So you might even use that to your advantage. Okay, thank you. All right, and the next question. In one of the quizzes in the course, it mentions that after you saute, you can deglaze the souks if desired. I didn't remember souks being mentioned earlier in the course, but maybe I missed it. Can you explain what this means? Yes, so this is a French term that refers to the little brown bits that develop on the surface of the pan, due to the juices that come out of the food item and the heat from the pan. And those little bits are really flavorful. And, I encourage my students to taste some of the souks on their own, just so you have an idea of how concentrated that flavor can be. And it varies based upon what you're preparing. But where possible, we do like to capture that through the deglazing process, because it adds a nice layer of umami, of flavor depth to the preparation. All right, I hope that's helpful for you, Hannah. All right, next question. What are your encouraging words of wisdom to a novice cooking school student? Although I'm excited about registering for this course, I'm a bit nervous as to how demanding this course might be. Well, as it turns out, my opening thoughts that I shared address your question to a certain extent, and I hope that you found that to be helpful for you. Now, in terms of the demand of the course, I'm not sure which course you're in, but certainly it's going to require your attention every week, and ideally a little bit every day, as you take a look at some of these foundational skills that are to be developed throughout the course, such as knife skills, and the understanding of cooking methods, whether it's the saute and how to take advantage of the souks that develop in the pan through the deglazing process. All of these should be approached with the idea of repeating the process, right? Repetition is what will make you a better cook. And so if you're able to incorporate the cooking lesson and the practice recipes into your daily meal repertoire, then it'll probably make most sense. Certainly in terms of time management, right? And that overall effort that you are putting into cooking and the time you spend in the kitchen, okay? I will mention that our long courses, our professional plant-based certification course, as well as our 6-month cook certification course, they're long. And, you really need to dig deep mentally to stay engaged, to make it to the finish line on time, if that's important to you. You can always extend the course. That is an option that we offer. But if you want to stay within that suggested completion window, then you need to really be in it, in the course, engaging, almost daily. Several hours a week is what you should plan to do. Okay, but as I've mentioned mentioned earlier, try to find the joy in the cooking, and always know that through the mundane, right, through the repetition, that your skills are developing, and we just need to put in the time to become, first of all, more comfortable in the kitchen, and then second, proficient at cooking. Okay, thank you. All right, next question. How do you scale up recipes? I have a cake recipe, for example. I don't know how to scale it up so that I can make a lot of them at once. Okay, so let me take a little sip here. I'm drinking some coffee, which is a coffee look-alike, but it's made from black figs, dried and ground. And this is a product from Oregon. Okay, let's see. Let me first sort of talk about scaling up recipes more generally, okay? And, so for example, to double a recipe is often no problem, okay? When we start to expand even further, well, let me back up and qualify what that means. So let's say in the cuisine kitchen, you're working with a recipe that yields 4 or 5 portions, right, of some savory preparation. If you were to double that for the 8 or 10 guests that are coming, you can probably do that very simply. But as you move beyond that to feeding larger groups, maybe 20 people or 50 people, then you need to pay attention to especially the more pungent ingredients, like garlic or like spices, okay, to begin with. Now, beyond that, there are certainly logistical issues, around prep and refrigeration and the equipment that you might need to complete the job, okay? When it comes to, baking, again, if you're starting out with a recipe that produces, 1 loaf of quick bread, maybe you can double that. Probably not a big deal in terms of the results, but you want to test it. Okay, you want to keep an open mind to testing these things first, and think about also the equipment that you're using, the cookware as well as the baking equipment. Okay, as we move, for example, from smaller baking pans to larger baking pans, for example, it takes a lot more time for heat to penetrate to the center of that batter, and for that cake to cook through evenly. And so there's going to be adjustments perhaps in temperature and certainly in time to get you there. Now, another consideration is, as we extend baking time, right, sometimes we might experience too much top heat or bottom heat. Top heat means heat coming from the top of the oven. Bottom heat means heat coming up from the bottom of the oven. So in other words, the tops get too dark or the bottoms get too dark. So we can move the rack up and down accordingly. And we can then also sometimes cover the tops of cakes as we need to protect the product from excess heat and browning. And then, of course, there's adjustment of the temperature, as I mentioned. So all of these variables must be kept in mind as you start to test recipes. Now, Arguably, an easier way to approach this in the baking and pastry kitchen is to look for a professional book on baking. Okay, and you might consider a textbook that is used in culinary schools that will often have recipes that already produce a large quantity of food. Okay, and so in other words, they're tested at that level, but it may mean that you will need to acquire some different cookware, maybe larger sheet pans, maybe some risers to fit into sheet pans in order to accommodate the larger volume of batter in that particular format. Okay, and so you ask an important question, but it's simple in its very early steps. But if you want to expand and really maybe start a business or cook for your neighbors on a larger scale, then there's going to be probably many more variables to attend to and testing that will be required on your part. Okay, but do consider first of all a professional book that will often have recipes that are already scaled for larger production. Thank you. All right, let's see. Next question. When I cook for my husband and myself, I use a recipe for 2 or 4. Like the former question, I know that I can't simply multiply by 5 when I cook for my extended family of 10. How can I adjust seasonings when I do that? Yes, so as I mentioned, if you're simply doubling a recipe, probably no problem, but this is a perfect example here. If you're going to multiply by 5, then some testing and note-taking will be necessary on your part. And yes, indeed, it's the seasonings, right? It's going to be those more concentrated flavorings that we use that will need the most adjustment. And that will need to be done on a to-taste basis. Okay, so this is where the note-taking comes into play. All right. And then, of course, keep in mind that temperatures will often need to be changed. And, of course, the size of your cooking vessels will need to be adjusted to accommodate the larger quantities of food as well. Okay. Now there are books for the savory kitchen that you can consult that would fall within the category of catering that do present recipes that are formatted for large scale production. Cooking for 50 people, for example. And so you might take a look at, some of these resources as a reference. All right, thank you. And the next question. For the first baking assignment, what are you looking for? Should we go with a certain level of difficulty or just make something we enjoy baking? Well, now, I am going to guess that you are referring to the go-to dish assignment, the go-to item, where you're asked to make something that's familiar to you. And, kind of like the kitchen reset assignment that I addressed a few minutes ago, this go-to assignment is a way for you to familiarize yourself with the interface and kind of get used to being a student with Rouxbe, as well as give us a chance to sort of understand a little bit, right, where you are with that particular cooking. Okay, how what your approach is to whatever it is that you're baking. It's not required that you produce anything, in particular in terms of a level of difficulty, right, or a style of product. It really is a chance for you to express a little bit of what you normally do in the kitchen, what you enjoy making. Okay, so take this as a fun assignment, and put in as much effort as you're comfortable doing. Okay. And yeah, I think that answers your question. Thank you. And next up, what's your favorite nut substitute for cashews in creamy sauces? I have a cashew allergy and don't feel tofu and white beans make adequate substitutions. Would blanched almond or macadamia nut work better? Well, let me start at the tail end of the sequence here and say that blanched almonds or macadamia nuts may certainly work. I would encourage you to give it a try, give them both a try, and see how you like the results, okay? It's going to depend on the accompanying flavors and how you like them relative to the dish that you're preparing, okay? As well as the texture and all those other aesthetic considerations, all right? I think I eat cashews, so when I have thought about making a cashew sauce, I have always used cashews, but the idea of using almonds or macadamia nuts is also appealing. Sunflower seeds I use from time to time as well. And, feel free to use any other seed or nut, that might appeal to you. When I think about the Indian tradition of cooking, poppy seeds come to mind. When I think about the Mexican tradition of cooking, walnuts come to mind. So really the world, right, is of nuts and seeds is going to be open to you, based upon what you're able to eat, and then also those aesthetic considerations that are important to you, right? But I think any of these items within this broad category of seeds and nuts are possibilities for you, and I hope you'll give it a try. Thank you. All right, next question is from Heather. For task 95, let's see, FOK Ultimate Course, using legumes, does tofu qualify as a legume? Should we use dried canned beans or lentils for this activity? Heather, please use the whole bean or legume, whether it's canned or dried. I think that's going to be that'll provide you the best practice for the intended focus of this activity and this lesson. All right, thank you. And let's see the next question. What is the best way to introduce vegan cheese to friends and family who are afraid to try it? Well, yeah, this is an interesting question, and I get questions like this once in a while regarding plant-based food, broadly speaking, and what I like to do is perhaps introduce these things, if I need to, in small doses, and not that it's necessary to hide the item per se, but present it as a secondary or tertiary ingredient. Whether it's in the form of a sauce or just some other component within a preparation, and you don't need to say anything about it. Right? It's just part of a beautiful meal that you prepared. And, if someone asks, tell them it's cheese. I mean, after all, that's kind of what it is, right? And how it's functioning. And if the diner continues to pry as to what kind of cheese and what's in it, then, I think you just leave it to them. At some point, the diner may decide to try it and find the enjoyment in that item, or the diner may choose to avoid it forever. And that there's nothing that you or I can do about that as the cook necessarily. Okay, we can only provide the food in a beautiful format, handled properly, and seasoned delicately, and all those things that we try to do, right, as the cook. But ultimately, it's up to the diner. And so I hope you'll give that gentle approach a try and see how it goes. All right. Thank you. And looks like the last question of the day. What are bold greens and what flavors do they have? Yeah, in our courses, we categorize salad greens, in sort of broad categories, and this is not specific to Rouxbe. This is really how we try to talk about greens relative to constructing a salad in the food world. And so if you work in a restaurant, you may use some very similar terms or the same terms here. But so what's a bold green? Bold just very simply means that the particular green, the vegetable, the leafy item, has a relatively bold or strong flavor, right, or taste. And so, compared to, let's say, iceberg lettuce, which is pretty mild, you might have arugula or, any number of examples that just have more flavor. And, it can be characterized as a strong flavor or a bold flavor, which, I would look at as being the same sort of thing. And we're trying to perhaps categorize the same item. Another term that's commonly used, aside from the mild iceberg and maybe something more bold, like watercress, as an example, which just has kind of a peppery, strong flavor to it, is bitter. And if we think about radicchio, radicchio is notably bitter. And so we often use that bitter label as a broad way to categorize greens. Okay, now they're not always green in color, but we call them greens, these salad components. Also keep in mind, a couple of things, right? These are just arbitrary categories, okay? And that, a given food item, a given lettuce green, may exhibit more than one flavor or taste character, right? In which case, we need to maybe choose the most prominent of those tastes and then place that lettuce item into a certain category. Okay, so I think the easiest way to start to learn what some of these terms mean, whether it's relative to lettuce, right, or any other tasting category, is indeed to taste the food. And what I do, and what I continue to do today, is I'll go to the store and I'll buy multiple examples of items in a given category, take them home, and with a piece of paper, right, and a pencil, I'll taste them and I'll take notes. And this helps me learn and remember, the personalities of these different ingredients. Okay, and this is something that I've always done with my on-ground students, is to do an herb tasting, right? To do a vinegar tasting, to do a dried bean that's been cooked tasting, and look at foods by category so that we can better understand how they compare to one another, and we can better understand what might be a suitable substitute for the other based upon the situation. Okay, and so get out and, in other words, train your palate and come to understand what these terms mean, and that helps with overall communication with other food professionals. Okay, and Yeah, I think that answers the two-part question here, okay? Whether something is going to be peppery or bitter or nutty or mild or sour or something else, right, within these lettuce categories, okay, or examples. All right. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining me today for this live event, for dropping in on my office hours. I hope this discussion was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you again. All right. Until then, happy cooking. Thank you.